Humanistic information analysis of long novels. The digital experiments on dialogues in tattoo, months in. This study aims to conduct several quantitative experiments on the text of tattoo and, through these experiments, to explore the possibility of information processing of data in the field of humanities. The title of the novel, Tattoo, refers to the marks that Koreans tattooed on their bodies when they were forced to leave their hometowns for conscription and military service by the Japanese and served as a means of identifying someone when they died. And the tattoo was also a symbol of the desire to return to their hometowns. This study targets Tattoo by Heung-gil, a representative Korean writer, and refers to some other Korean long novels from a comparative literary perspective. Tattoo is set in the family of Cho Myung-bae, a large landowner in the Sansu region of Jeolla Province, Korea from the late 1930s to the early 1940s, that is in the latter half of the Japanese colonial period, and contains the story of a family of two generations, old and new, living in a violent era under coercive foreign powers. The author himself stated that this work was written with the intention of being unfriendly to readers. He skillfully used an overwhelming variety of vocabulary, especially Jeolla dialect, archaic language, and native language, to the point that no other author could match. This means that the writer used vocabulary that is unfamiliar and difficult to the readers. Korean language is a type of agglutinative language that uses inflection and conjugation. Therefore, it is essential to identify the basic form of words in sentence analysis. All vocabulary in Tattoo is saved in KWIC format according to the order in which it appears in the work and stored in MS Access Table format and MS Excel sheet format. Some information is added to the data for further linguistic analysis. The objectives of this study are as follows. 1. To build an analysis corpus for Tattoo. 2. To extract quantitative information on vocabulary and dialogue/narration texts in Tattoo from this corpus. 3. To explore the meaning of these quantitative phenomena from the perspective of literary aesthetics. This is a study that can reveal the author's creative technique. Sentences in a novel are divided into narration and dialogue. Dialogue is a record of conversations between characters and is often indicated using punctuation marks such as quotation. A work can be composed of either narration or dialogue alone, but most works are composed of a mixture of narration and dialogue. The ratio of the mixture of narration and dialogue can vary depending on the author and the work. Through this mixture, the author demonstrates his or her own special creative technique. In traditional literary studies, research on this field has been neglected. In fact, not only is language itself a difficult subject to study, but analyzing vocabulary and sentences manually is almost impossible. In a novel, dialogue is an essential element that has a multi-layered effect on the flow and depth of the entire work. Just as dialogue forms relationships, conveys information, and expresses emotions, dialogue in a novel also performs various roles and functions and draws readers into the story. It delicately reveals each character's social status, education level, personality, emotional state, etc. It also develops events and intensifies the conflict. Dialogue in novel is not just a means of communication, it is a core literary device that gives characters three-dimensionality, dynamically leads events, and deeply explores the theme of the work. Pre-processing. The PDF files of all the works were acquired through a contract between the publishing company and the presenter. This slide shows the KWIC format, which is converted from a plain text by some computer processing. Basic information of KWIC index consists of keyword, context, and location information. The basic form of each word was extracted by analyzing the phrases of nouns and verbs. This task, commonly called morphological analysis or lemmatization, is the most important task in processing information about Korean sentences. The National Institute of the Korean Language's Learning Vocabulary Grade System, 6 levels, was applied first, and for vocabulary not included in this system, I applied levels 7, 8, and 9. Level 8 and 9 vocabularies are words that are difficult for the public to understand. Experiment 1, Basic Quantitative Information Analysis. To examine the characteristics of tattoo vocabulary, the ratio of word type, token and TTR, and part of speech is investigated. In addition, to identify the linguistic characteristics of tattoo, I compared the vocabulary of 9 other long novels of 3 writers. The results of the experiment 1 show that the ranking of the ratio of each part of speech in tattoo and modern Korean long novels is similar. In other words, the order of noun verb adverb adjective at the top is the same. The most notable feature is that the noun ratio, 41.51%, of tattoo is 10% higher than that of modern Korean novels, 31.2%. The TTR value is a measure of the so-called vocabulary recycling rate, and a higher value can be seen as using a more diverse vocabulary. Excluding the inconsiderable roots, 58.18, in tattoo, the highest TTR is exclamations, 13.06. This is much higher than the value of the modern novels to which it is compared, 3.63. This is related to the fact that many exclamations are used in which the characters lament or criticize other characters or situations with which they are not content. The value of noun vocabulary is also high, and the fact that it is twice as high as that of modern novels overall, including this, provides grounds for evaluating tattoo as being overwhelming in terms of vocabulary diversity. There are over 100 characters in tattoo. In this study, the top 20 characters in the following table with high frequency according to the number of dialogues are considered important characters. The table shows how many times important characters are mentioned in each chapter. The survey is conducted by standardizing the titles of characters, and both narration and dialogue texts are included. The fact that a character is mentioned multiple times in a work means that the character engages in the action of the novel. From this data, we can learn the following. The characters mentioned in all 20 chapters are Cho Buyong and Mrs. Kwanchen. Cho Myung-bae is rarely mentioned after chapter 17, which is related to his stroke in chapter 16. Lee Yun-sil appears from chapter 7 and is mentioned continuously until chapter 20. This is related to the fact that her residence changed from Jeonju to Sani, the setting of the work. What can be known from the table above is that the characters who lead the events in this work are Father Cho Myung-bae, eldest son Cho Buyong, and eldest daughter Cho Sunjeom. This can be seen from the high frequency of mentions of them. The graph shows the frequency of mentions of Cho Buyong, Cho Sunjeom, and Cho Myung-bae. Centering around chapter 11, in the first half of the story, a certain character is mentioned with a high frequency of about 2,000 times in each chapter. Tattoo is a long story and is narrated from the author's omniscient point of view. The author is not a consistent narrator in the novel but rather adopts a three-dimensional approach by putting a specific character forward as the narrator when necessary. Even the narration is often narrated from the perspective of the character in question. It is difficult to confirm this characteristic with this level of quantitative data. Experiment 2-1, Understanding the character's personality through vocabulary level analysis. Characterizing implementation methods in novels. To implement the character's personality is through the words the character uses. The content of the words may be helpful, but the level of vocabulary he/she uses indirectly reveals the character's personality. Region of origin, class, academic background, and personal characteristics can be revealed through the vocabulary in the dialogue. Here, I will examine the method of analyzing the character through the dialogue, which is the vocabulary grade system, and the method of analyzing by type of vocabulary, native words, Chinese characters, basic words, extended words, etc., that supplements this method. This grade system is too detailed, so in this presentation, it is reduced to a three-category system as screen. When analyzing the nature of the vocabulary used by a character, the most important level is advanced in this table. The nature of the vocabulary corresponding to this advanced is shown on the slide. In the table above, Shin Chun-bok has the highest rate of advanced language, and the lowest rate of beginner and intermediate language. In fact, he has a speech impediment as a developmental disability. In addition, he tends to take other people's words. Considering these points, even though the vocabulary he uses is advanced, it is not because he uses difficult vocabulary, but because he uses abnormal vocabulary, which is why he is evaluated that way. In the table above, we can see that Lee Yun-sil and her mother use advanced vocabulary the least, while they use beginner vocabulary at a high frequency. This is thought to be due to the fact that, compared to other characters, their area of residence, or hometown, is relatively urban. Lee Yun-sil received higher education, and her mother is the wife of a police officer. Experiment 2-2, investigating the personality of a character through analysis of vocabulary types by character. To supplement the problems of analyzing the vocabulary grade system, I classified them by type and analyzed their quantitative information. Korean vocabulary can be divided into 1. Native vocabulary and 2. Foreign vocabulary including Chinese character vocabulary. 2. Chinese character vocabulary can be a clue that can reveal the literacy of a character. Based on this, I analyze it using the 4 systems on slide. The results of this analysis are not significantly different from the results of the vocabulary grade system. Lee Yun-sil and her mother, Cho Gwyon, who is studying in Seoul, and Pastor Mun and his wife are from or live in a place far from the Jeollado countryside, Sansumayan, which is the spatial setting of this novel, and are quite good at speaking standard Korean. Even if we exclude Shin Chun-bak, who has a developmental disability because his conversation volume is very small, the cooking maid, Enicheol's mom, church deacon, Mrs. Gwanchin, Cho Myung-bae, Sangami's mom, and Cho Jin-young, who have a standard Korean speaking ability of less than 90%, are natives of Sansumayan and show a language speaking ability faithful to the local dialect. When calculated as the total sum of the dialogues, the standard Korean speaking rate comes out to 87.32%. This value coincidentally falls somewhere in the middle between those who received secondary education and those who did not. Cho Jin-young, who is close to this value, is someone who received elementary education. Through this analysis, it can be evaluated that the author of Tattoo succeeded in expressing the character's personality through the dialogue text. Experiment 3, comparative analysis with the amount of dialogue in Korean long novels. Research results of experiments 3. The vocabulary of the dialogue was appropriately selected to express the character's personality. The proportion of dialogue in narration text is stable compared to other writers' long novels. Currently, it is centered on the semantic part of vocabulary, but it is also necessary to investigate the morphological part. This is because endings and particles can also have dialectal characteristics. There is another type of dialogue, so-called monologue. It should be studied in detail. We need to further study more about techniques for representing quantitative phenomena visually rather than numerically, and we also need to explore more about statistical analysis techniques. If basic text data is secured in high quality in the future, we expect to be able to make more valid interpretations through comparative perspectives. Thank you for watching.